what is hiding in those weak and drunken hearts. Guess he kissed the girls and made them cry, those hard-faced queens of misadventure. God knows what is hiding in those weak and sunken eyes. Fiery throngs of muted angels giving love but getting nothing back. Oh, people, help the people. And if you're homesick, give me your hand and I'll hold it. People, help the people.
If you're joining me this morning, if you notice my title, it said Words of Wisdom for Foster Parents. I do help foster parents as well as families in fighting CPS because they have their children and they want to make sure that their children are well taken care of. Throughout the years, I have helped foster parents who have struggled with children that come in their home that have behavioral problems, and the behavioral problems are expected. I mean, you rip these children away from their families, you expect them to have some issues and trauma, and they do it on purpose and so that they can medicate them. My goal is to keep the children from being medicated. So a lot of times the foster parents are at wit's end, don't know how to handle certain situations, and so I will go in and assess the situation and try to help these foster parents understand the behaviors, because a lot of those behaviors that these children are doing are behaviors that I did myself in foster care in the different foster homes that I was in. So I understand what they're doing, why they're doing it. And so foster parents, the first thing I have to tell you, you've got two different kinds of foster kids. You got the kind that have been abused and traumatized by either their parents or whoever that they were living with. Sometimes these kiddos that go into foster care are either abandoned or, I mean, okay, you can argue the 90% versus the 10%, but here's the thing. These children are traumatized whether the children are taken rightfully or wrongfully, okay? So you've got two kinds of children. You got the one child that doesn't want to call you mom and dad. That's because they want to go back home, okay? They don't want to accept anybody else in their life that is a mom and dad, okay? Because those children want to go home, okay? And then you have the child that has been severely abused by the family, and I have children that don't even want to see their family, their birth families, and they want to find a mom and dad, and they just want to be accepted. So you have two different kinds of foster kids here, guys. So you got to determine which kind of foster kid that you've taken in. Now, if you can't force them to call you mom and dad, and I wouldn't recommend it, you tell them whatever makes you feel comfortable. You can call me auntie, mommy, call you miss, if it were me, Miss Pennington. I don't ever allow them to call me by my first name, because here's the reason by that. Your children don't call you by your first name, so these children shouldn't call you by your first name. It's called authority and respect, okay? So you want to make sure you keep that respect, okay? And you don't want to cross that boundary. And your children don't want to see you, like if you have your own children, they don't want to see you allow this child to call you by your first name if they're not allowed to call you by your first name, okay? So you have to have boundaries, and you have to have a little bit of fairness between your own children and the foster children that you bring in. But here's the thing, guys, if you really want the best behaviors out of your foster kids, don't make them feel like outsiders, okay? I shared a story a couple of videos back about an evangelist who had a kiddo from 2 years old. The kid was going to be going on his 8th birthday, and they came out to preach at our church, and it was a really good family, okay? This kiddo was a really good kid. But the evangelist got up and he introduced his family as my wife, my son, my daughter, my foster child, okay? And I understand a lot of times foster parents don't even think about this. But when you introduce a foster child and they've been in your care for quite some time, you're basically, that child, when they hear that, is hearing, I don't belong. I'm still the outsider. And if I do anything wrong, it's not their fault because I'm not their kid. Okay? So that's what they're hearing. That's not what you're saying, but that is what they're hearing. Ooh, enlightening. Did you guys see that? Okay? So, does that make sense so far? And if you have questions, guys, go ahead and ask them. That way I can address any questions that you might have. I might have to put my glasses on so I can see the questions. Let me look, see if I got my glasses. I had them yesterday. I finally found them. My husband had them in his coat pocket. So, let me see if I can find my glasses. Oh, goodness. Well, maybe not. Maybe I set them down. But anyways, I'll try to read any of your questions. Or if you want to come on video and ask questions, that's fine too. Okay, so this evangelist introduced his family like this. And then during the sermon, he had actually made the comments about, because he was teaching about family and he was teaching about godly families. And he made the comment that sometimes he just doesn't understand. As a parent, sometimes you just don't understand the behaviors. And so he was like, we'd be in the middle of playing a game and he will just have a total meltdown, topple the game over, go run to his room and cry, and we can't find out. He won't talk to us. He won't tell us what's wrong, and he ruins the game for everybody. Okay? And I mean, he's talking about this kind of stuff in his sermon. Okay? The kiddo is sitting in the audience, people. Okay? So here I am taking notes because I want to help this kid. Okay? I mean, it's a good evangelist. He's a good man. But the thing is, he doesn't know what he's doing. And he's had this child in his family for almost a little over 5 years, and he's still having problems with this foster child. And so I'm taking notes, hoping and praying that he's open to criticism and open to words of wisdom and advice from somebody who's been in foster care. So after the service was over, I pulled him aside and I said, look, can I just give you a little bit of words of wisdom coming from a person who's been in foster care her whole life. I was in foster care from birth, 3 days old, to 19 years old. I was actually ward of the state till I was 21. I actually had to get permission to get married. I said, would you please let me give you some words of wisdom? He's like, absolutely. I told him, I said, every time you introduce your family that way, you're basically saying he doesn't belong. That's what he's hearing, okay? He doesn't see it as you're patting yourself on the back because you've been a foster parent for 5 years, okay? He doesn't see it that way. And the people in the audience that give you a clap because you're a foster parent, okay, you're a parent. You took a child in your life. It's not about patting yourself on the back, okay? So I told him, I said, if you would introduce him as your kid and not as your foster kid, and quit talking about him as if he's an outsider every time you talk to somebody, and definitely don't use him in your sermons. He is not your sermon piece, okay? If you're going to use anybody in your sermon piece, you use all your children, not just him, okay, as examples. And you don't refer to him as your foster kid. And I explained to him, all he's hearing is, I don't belong. Now, in his sermon, he did mention that this kiddo, who has been in his family since he was 2 years old, has yet to call him mom and dad. He calls them Mrs. and Mr., okay, and their last name. And hello. And so he listened to what I had to say, and few weeks, about a month later, I get a letter in the mail from this evangelist. And he said that the next time that he went to a speaking engagement, he took my word of advice. He said, this is my wife, my son, my daughter, my son. And he didn't use him in his sermon, and he didn't talk to people in the audience saying that we're foster parents, and we're foster parents, and we're foster parents. Because everything out of his mouth was, we're foster kids. We got foster kids. We foster. Okay, that's all well and great. And on the ride home that day, this child asked if he could call them mom and dad, just out of the blue. Why? Because he finally felt accepted. He finally felt like he wasn't the outsider. He finally had somebody who accepted him for who he was. Okay? So the parents was ecstatic. They're like, yes, of course you can call us mom and dad. I mean, they're hoping to adopt him. And so they hadn't had any outbursts. They haven't had any behavioral problems since then. Why? Because the child finally feels like he belongs. Okay, so that's one word of advice. Another time I had a foster mom who was really struggling with a little one she's disabled. This child came into her care at birth because mom had used meth during the pregnancy, and she had a trach, and she had medical problems and issues, and this mom took this little baby into her home, a really good foster mom. And like I said, I'm torn. When I first started this about foster parents, trust me, I had to really ask God to heal my heart and open my eyes that not every foster parent is a wicked, evil foster parent. There are out there, okay, and I have shut them down, and I will shut them down, won't apologize for it. But those foster parents that are taking these kiddos in and are good foster homes, good foster parents, this is for you, okay? This little one was required to go to visits. Excuse me, my throat's kind of sore today. This little one was required to go to visits with her birth mother, who was still a meth head, still did drugs, who didn't know how to behave in visits, really upset this little girl during the visits. And so when she would go home to the foster mom says every single time that she has a visit, what about foster parents who demand kids accept them as parents when the kids refuse to do it? They shouldn't. Teresa, those foster parents should never demand that they call them mom and dad. Okay, it shouldn't be something that they should do. If they want to be a good foster parent, they should not demand them to call them mom and dad. And that's because that child who refuses to do it most likely wants to go home. Okay, and they don't want to accept another family. Okay, they want to go home. Okay, so this little girl would have these visits. It was very traumatizing to her. She didn't know this woman, but she was required by CPS to go visit this mom, and she would go visit this mom, and the foster mom was like, I don't know what to do. Every time this little girl, now she's nonverbal, she doesn't talk, everything is very, if you know anything about autistic children and children who are nonverbal, a lot of times they're very sensory children. They like the way things feel, the way things touch. They're very sensitive to clothing that touch their skin. But this little girl had this thing, and the foster mom, I don't know what to do. Every time she has a visit, she comes home and she plays with her poop and she wipes it all over the walls like she's drawing pictures with her poop. She plays with it. And I don't know what to do. It's every single time she has a visit, I get all upset, and I got to wash this off the walls. It's very upsetting to me because I don't know how to help her, and I hate seeing her this way, and she cries for hours after the visits, and so she's like, I don't know what to do, and I said, well, one, don't get upset with her. When we need to redirect that sensory need, okay, we want to encourage her to be able to have that coping skill, but in a controlled environment. And she's like, what are you talking about? And I said, well, hear me out here. I said, what if every time that when I bring this little girl back from her visit, I said, why don't we have it already set up for her, because we already know she's upset. We already know that she's having difficulty, and this is a coping skill that is struggling with how to express how she feels. She clearly feels the need to have that sensory, the poop. I know the idea of someone playing with poop. Think about the consistency of the poop. It's soft, it's pliable, it has color to it, and they can rub it on the walls. Okay, I know it sounds nasty, but to a child, they don't think about, oh, it's poop, okay, because they don't think past the sensory part of it. So I encouraged her to set up, when we brought her home, we put plastic on the walls, or she didn't even put the plastic on the wall. She had one wall designated for this little girl. I mean, I suggested plastic, but she's like, no, if she wants to touch the wall, that's fine. So she designated one wall in the kitchen, and what we did is bananas. We would get different bananas. We'd get the really mushy ones and then the harder ones, okay, because it's all different consistencies. The little girl liked consistency, and she would add color to the bananas. Okay, the little girl's favorite color, I think, was green and red, so she would use green and red bananas, and she would let the little girl play with the bananas and rub it all over the walls. And you know what? The poop behavior stopped. Okay, why? Because she was able to still have that coping skill of the texture and the feeling, and it soothed her. And rubbing it on the wall and drawing the picture, she was actually drawing pictures because she can't express herself. And you know, that little girl, every single time we brought her back from a visit, would take a beeline to the kitchen, expecting to have those bananas ready for her to be able to express. It was like an anger. She was able, and she would do it for hours. And the mom had it controlled. Once she was done, it was an easy cleanup and no more poop on the walls. So if you struggle with a little one that's, you know, rubbing poop all over, don't spank them. Don't yell at them and scream at them and tell them how gross and disgusting they are. They don't understand that. You've got to understand, these children that have disabilities are not like normal children that you can sit there and say, oh, that's gross. They don't understand that. I have a severely autistic son. He's stage 3 autism. He's nonverbal. I have never hit him, ever. I've never said no and smacked his hand. Why? He's not going to understand that. He's not like a normal child that understands that. If you give him Cheetos one day and the next day you tell him no, he's not going to understand that concept because he just had it yesterday. He doesn't understand that concept. He's not like a normal child that, I mean, at the age of 3, he's not going to understand the concept, why I can have it this time, but I can't have it this time. He doesn't understand that concept. You got to understand the child and their needs, okay? So if you're having a struggle with a child and you don't know, there's different ways to try things. It's not about punishment. You don't change a child's behavior necessarily by punishment. You've got to figure out where the behaviors are coming from. Another child I went in to work with, he was a little older child. He is verbal, and he was severely abused, okay? I think he was about 10 years old, and he was severely abused by starvation. His parents were drug addicts, and he barely ever had food. He was always, the reason CPS took him into care was because he was starving a lot. The parents weren't providing the food that he needed, and he had been beaten many times, and so he was very skittish about, you know, if you raised your hand, he would, you know, duck like that. A child who does that is used to being hit. So and my husband, my poor husband, when we first got married, he would he's a preacher, okay? He's a preacher, so he talks with his hands, right? And we'd be in the car, and he'll do this, and I'm over there doing this. Why? Because I was used to being beat, okay? So if you see a child that flinches every time you raise your arms, probably because they've been beat, okay? And when you see them flinch like that, reach out and give them a hug. Say, you know what, can I give you a hug? And make sure you ask first. That is a word of advice. I can tell you this right now. When a child comes into your home, you need to get permission to hug them, okay? And here's the reason why. Don't push yourself on them, okay? They're scared, they're traumatized, they're pulled away from my family is very, okay, so work on the verbal abuse. So this child, he struggled. He came from a home that was very struggling. So when this foster mom got him, she's like, I don't know what to do. I punish him, and the behavior gets worse. And I said, what are you punishing him for? And she goes, well, he keeps stealing food and hoarding it in his room in different places, and it's molding, and it's gross, it's disgusting. He'll steal things from the freezer, and then it molds, it rots. I don't know what to do. He's stealing canned food. I find it everywhere in his room. And I said, well, what kind of punishment are you giving him when he does this? Oh, he gets to go to bed hungry. You are just telling him he needs to steal. You are just enforcing that need to steal. And she's like, what are you talking about? I said, you told me he comes from a background where he went hungry. He starved. I did. I starved. What he's doing is he's hoarding for the famine. He's hoarding from when he doesn't have it. He has it now. He has food in the home. But the problem is you send him to bed without food for punishment. Therefore, you're just enforcing that need, that coping skill to steal food and hoard it for when he goes to bed hungry. Okay, you're just reinforcing that need to steal. And she's like, well, I never thought about it like that. And I said, so you need to sit him down. You need to tell him and have a contract with him. A verbal contract. You can even write it out if you want to, so that he has it in writing that you will not punish him in the way that he is going to go to bed hungry. He is no longer ever going to go to bed hungry. And that no punishment will be with food. And I said, because that need, that coping skill of the times that he did starve and the times that he didn't have food, I said, you just reinforce that behavior. I said, so make that verbal agreement with him that anytime he's hungry, anytime that he needs food, all he has to do is ask for it. I said, now a punishment can be he only gets peanut butter and jelly and a milk, but he won't go to bed hungry. Okay? I said, there's different ways. I mean, if that's a rule in your home, they have this rule that if you don't work, you don't eat. I mean, that's biblical. But the thing is, when a child is used to being starved, beaten, and stuff like that, that is not the way to handle it. It's not about punishment. It's about understanding the child. Okay? So sitting him down and saying, look, we're not going to do this. You don't have to steal food. You won't ever go hungry in my home. You won't ever have to feel like you need to steal. So if you're hungry, all you have to do is say so. And, you know, that behavior stopped. Okay? It stopped. And he never had to feel the need to steal again. And that I believe they ended up having the privilege of adopting him. And but that behavior of stealing and hoarding food and the constant, you know, every time that they would talk or something, or he would flinch, they would, you know, hugging a child versus, you know, and demanding is a lot different. Now, a lot of times I encourage foster parents to do, I even encourage regular parents to do this. It's called couches. When you see a child that's struggling behavior-wise and you're not understanding, I mean, you're not going to understand everything, okay? There's a time that you can have what I like to call couches. That means you sit them down and you're not there to criticize them. You're there to try to understand them. You know, when kids scream at you, you don't understand me. It's okay to say, you're right, I don't. Would you please enlighten me? Okay, parents, admit that you don't know everything is the key here in parenting, okay? You are not going to be a perfect parent. You are going to make mistakes. You are going to not understand your child. Every child is different. They're not cookie cut. Not every child comes with you've got these guru books out there, do this and do that. Unfortunately, children are not cookie cut. They have their own personalities, their own needs, their desires, their dreams. They are not cookie cut. So what works for one child may not work for the other child. Okay, so punishment for one child may work, but won't work for... I'm going to use my own children as an example. I had one child, she was so sensitive that all I had to do was give her the look of disappointment and the waterworks would start. And she'd be all, I'm so sorry, I won't do it again. All I had to do was give her the look, right? Then I had another child, I called her she struggled with her anger and stuff. The look didn't work. The look just made her more mad. Okay, so you have different children who have different needs, and what works for one child is not going to work for another. Okay, and so you can't, these house rules and these disciplines and stuff like that have to be, I like to call it natural consequences. It has to fit the crime. Okay, each child is different. Each punishment should be different. It shouldn't have to be, I believe in natural consequences. There's a lot of different things that you can do for children. Okay, just understand that children are not cookie cut. They're not going to come and what's going to work for one is going to work for the other. So just a little bit of words of wisdom, guys. If you are a foster parent, understand you're going to have two different kinds of kids. You're going to have the kids that want to go back home, and how dare you be their parent, okay? You need to respect that. I know it's hard, and it's my house rules, my this, my that. I'm not going to let you control train. There's a way of dealing with that. You're right. I'm just a temporary placement for you. You can call me Auntie so-and-so or Miss Pennington, and I would no way want to be a replacement for your parents. I mean, you have those kind of children, and then you have those other children that come running in, hugging you, want you to accept them as their mom and dad, and those are the ones that want to be integrated into your home and don't want to be the outside child, don't want everybody to know that they're foster kids. They want to belong. So you've got two different kinds of foster kids here, guys. And which one is it that you're dealing with? And that's what you have to ask yourself when they show up on your doorstep. What kind of foster kid do I have? Do I have the kind that wants to go home? Not every child wants to go home. Okay, guys? It's just the fact. It's just the truth, okay? And then you have the children that are looking for somebody to love them, that don't feel loved, who are coming from an actual abusive home, okay? So, just a little bit of words of wisdom. If you have any questions for me, anybody have any questions for me? The biggest key here, guys, is yelling. Don't yell at these kids. If you're a yeller, learn how to not be a yeller, okay? Call me up and let me teach you how, okay? Because yelling doesn't solve the situation. All it does is add fuel to the fire, okay? I worked in juvenile facilities where these kiddos, literally this close to my face, screaming every profanity that they possibly could to get a rise out of me, okay? They're going to test every water, every comment, every cuss word. They're going to, everything that they can throw at you, these kiddos are going to do. The problem is don't give in to it. Don't yell. Don't scream. Just wait. I would have children literally exhaust themselves screaming and yelling at me. I mean, literally this close to my face screaming, okay? I had one kid do it for almost an hour screaming at me. He exhausted himself. He was so tired from yelling and screaming at me. He literally threw himself on the couch and he goes, "What is it going to take to make you upset?" And I said, "You know what? I know you're upset right now, and everything that you're saying right now you don't mean." He just burst into tears, and he's like, "You're right, I don't." He goes, "You're the only person, the only staff member here that cares about us kids, and you don't yell at us, you don't mistreat us." And he goes, "I had no right." I mean, he's apologizing to me for screaming at me for the last hour, okay? Now, other staff members, man, they would have screamed back instantly. "How dare you? Don't yell at me." No, he needed to vent. He literally needed to vent. And when he was done venting, he sat down on the couch literally like, "Oh." And I said, "Now are you ready to talk? I'm more than willing to talk with you." Okay? That's how children would open up to me. Why? Because they understood that I understood where they were coming from. I know that they're angry. They've got so much anger pent up inside them. They feel unwanted. They feel so discouraged. They feel like it's something that they've done, and it's nothing they've done. That's just it. It's nothing they've done.